When the call came in, it sounded routine. A contractor at the Azure Tower, the kind of high-end glass monolith that scraped the clouds and promised skyline serenity, had found something strange during a renovation. I'd handled hundreds of construction disputes, trespass reports, and property mishaps. But that morning, something in the foreman's voice told me this wasn't routine. The foreman, Joe Mendez, met me in the lobby, hard hat still on, hands shaking. "Detective," he said, "you'd better see this yourself." We rode the elevator up to the penthouse, the kind owned by people who didn't take calls from local cops. The owner of record was a shell company tied to a London-based developer. No one had lived here in years. Joe's crew had been redoing the flooring when one of his men's drills hit hollow space beneath the marble. A few hours later, they'd exposed a trapdoor, steel, with a biometric lock long since deactivated. When I stepped into the hidden room, it hit me immediately. The air was stale, metallic, preserved. A single workbench stood against the far wall. Shelves lined with dusty blueprints, architectural sketches, and rolled documents filled the space. Everything was pristine, except for one blueprint that lay unrolled on the table. There were stains on it. Dried. Rust brown. Joe whispered. We thought it was paint. But look closer. It wasn't paint. The patterns were too splattered, too erratic. Blood. I snapped photos and called it in. No sign of a body. No weapon. No immediate evidence of a struggle. But there was something else. Faint marks across the concrete, as if heavy equipment or furniture had once been dragged away. The blueprints themselves were detailed floor plans for the Azure Tower. Yet the layout didn't quite match the finished structure above us. A wing that didn't exist. A corridor that dead-ended in real life but continued on paper. Someone had used these plans to hide something or someone. When the forensic team arrived, they lifted partial prints off the bench. Weeks later, those prints came back with no match in any criminal database. Whoever worked here was clean. But a deeper clue lay in the margins of the blueprint, a set of initials, MV, and a date. August 2019. That sent me down a rabbit hole. In 2019, a local architect named Mariana Voss vanished without a trace. She'd been part of the original Azure Tower design team. The company said she'd left mid-project for personal reasons. Her family filed a missing person report. It went nowhere. No body, no evidence, no witnesses. Until now, when I visited her old office, I found something the developers hadn't erased, an archived email thread between Voss and the lead investor, a man named Alan Creighton, the same man behind the shell company that owned the penthouse. The tone of her messages was increasingly desperate. Complaints of altered plans, concealed structures, cash deals off the books. She mentioned pressure to sign off on design irregularities. Her final email read, "If you don't stop this, I'm going to the press." The blueprints don't lie. That was 2 days before she disappeared. The room beneath the penthouse wasn't just a forgotten storage space. It was a vault, a private workspace, likely used for off-record designs and confidential revisions. But the blood suggested a confrontation. Someone had brought her here. Something had gone wrong. Still, there was no corpse, no official crime scene. Creighton's lawyers claimed ignorance and denied ever meeting Voss personally. Without a body, prosecution was impossible. Then, a week later, Joe called me again. "Detective, we found something else." Hidden inside one of the blueprint tubes was a small flash drive, wrapped in a faded handkerchief. On it were architectural revisions for Azure Tower, alongside offshore payment logs, project codes, and contractor bribes. But one file stood out: Mirror Room and Movi. It was grainy security footage from inside that same hidden chamber. It showed Voss entering, blueprints in hand. Another figure followed, a tall man in a suit, face half hidden. There was shouting, though the audio was muted. She slammed her plans on the table. The man lunged forward. The camera flickered, then cut out. No visible assault, no proof of death, but enough to confirm she'd been here. Enough to unravel a web of fraud worth millions. When I presented the evidence, Creighton's empire began to crack. He was indicted for financial crimes, not murder. The blood on the blueprints tied him to obstruction and tampering, but without a body, It stayed a ghost case, legally incomplete, morally devastating. Months later, Azure Tower reopened under new management. The hidden room was sealed for good. But sometimes I think about that space, the sterile silence, the blueprints stained with someone's last fight for truth. The press called it the blood on the blueprints case, though technically no one died on record. Still, the evidence of harm lingered in every line, every stroke of ink sheet drawn to expose corruption hidden beneath luxury. In the end, it wasn't the blood that solved it. It was the design itself. Blueprints never lie. People do. Subscribe to Crime Scenes Point 1 for more jaw-dropping true crime narratives.